Hi, Mandy. Thank you so much for being with us here today.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
So, today we're going to talk a little bit about setting boundaries, managing perceptions in our relationships, and how to communicate more assertively. So, I know that I'm pretty assertive, but I think I'm the only one of my friends that's very assertive. Especially when I see them communicate with their husbands and their boyfriends. I'm definitely very assertive, and most women are not. So, I think I have a great life and I'm doing well. So maybe being more is a good thing.
It's definitely not a bad thing. And I think sometimes we confuse being assertive with being aggressive. And there's a big distinction between the two, right? Being aggressive, you go after what you want, but without regard for the other person's experiences, feelings, needs. Whereas when we're assertive, we still go after what we want, but we do take into consideration our partner. And so being able to craft messages that still allow you to say what you want to say, to express your needs, to express your desires, to try to work towards getting what you want, but doing it in a way where it's going to foster teamwork, where it's going to foster problem solving, as opposed to making your partner feel attacked. Because once we feel attacked, we shut down. We don't want to
Yes.
we don't want to have any part in that conversation anymore. So being assertive is good. Being assertive is good because you're more likely to have your needs met, but at the same time, you're taking your partner into consideration as well.
Okay, so I like that distinction. But before we begin, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey and what brought you to focus on communication arts and sciences?
Absolutely. So the short story is when I started my undergraduate degree, I actually wanted to go into journalism, broadcasting, that sort of thing. But because of the way the department was set up, I was also required to take interpersonal communication courses. And it was sitting in those courses that I realized, wait a minute, although I still like the journalism stuff, this stuff is really interesting to me. This stuff is interesting to me because I can see how it really does affect my day to day interactions with people. It's not just about fostering the relationships you currently have, but it's also about forming relationships. It's about building self confidence in relationships. And so that was the stuff that really got me interested. And then I could also see in my own day to day activities how what I was learning about in my classes was playing out in my own life. And oh, wow, we just learned about this theory. If I applied what I'm learning about here to these interactions, I'm going to get better results. So being able to see changes in myself is really what got me interested in this because I saw how powerful it is to understand what these skills are, to practice these skills, and to then be able to use these skills in your own relationships.
Yeah, that's like how I felt when I was studying the psychology of persuasion. I was just fascinated. It's amazing.
Yes,
So let's start with boundaries. Why should people even set boundaries?
that's a great question. And I think a lot of times we don't realize we need boundaries until they have been violated. So anytime that you start to feel, I just call them just the negative emotions. And you might not necessarily be able to put your finger on exactly what you're feeling, but something's not quite right in your relationship. And when I say relationship, by the way, any type of relationship that you have, a friendship, a romantic relationship, a work relationship, something feels off. And that's a good indication that a boundary has been violated. And so maybe you should step back and think about, okay, what just happened? And is this something that I need to address? Is this something that I want to make sure doesn't happen again? We need boundaries because they help us maintain a sense of what's important to ourselves. Sometimes in our relationships, we get a little lost. Things that we recognize that once were important to us can get a little lost and we lose sight of those. So it's a way to stay true to yourself as well and to recognize what is important for you in a relationship. It doesn't matter if it's a relationship that you have been in for years and years, or you're starting a brand new relationship. Boundaries can really be helpful in, like I said, maintaining your sense of self, reasserting yourself in a relationship if it's one that you've been in for a while. And setting those boundaries, defending those boundaries is also a real ego boost. It feels good when you know what you want and you're able to get what you want. So, lots of good reasons to have these boundaries. And I think it's one of these things, too, that we don't really consciously think about a lot is, why do I need to set boundaries? Or my relationship is really good. There's nothing wrong with my relationship. I don't need boundaries. So just understanding what a boundary is and the purpose that they serve is a good first step in knowing why we should have boundaries.
So, going to more romantic relationships, what are some examples of maybe common boundaries in relationships that women in particular are less likely to set?
So a lot of times it might be behaviors that they don't like in their significant other. Could be behaviors towards the women themselves or just behaviors in general. And maybe someone doesn't feel like their partner is listening to them. And so being clear with your partner, listen, when I tell you that there's something really important that I would like to talk about, I expect you to turn off the television, put down your phone. Let's try to minimize the distractions as much as we can and have a real conversation. And if you're not able to do that, because this is another important part of consequence or of boundaries, is what's a consequence to that? Everybody knows that an empty threat isn't going to do anything. So what can you and when I say consequences too, I don't mean to get nasty here, but what could you say that would really get your partner to do what you're asking them to do? Put down the phone, turn off the TV, and give you their attention. Or a lot of times things with childcare and housework, so much of that responsibility falls on the woman. And that's not to diss the men, it's societal, right? It's these roles that we've grown up watching, learning about in our own families, in the media. That doesn't make it right, but that's why we're engaging in the roles that we're engaging in. And if you need some me time, right? And the only time you're going to get your me time is on Saturday morning. Listen, you are going to take the kids to whatever their activities are on Saturday morning so that I can go to my yoga class. And if I am not able to make it to my yoga class, I'm going to be more stressed out for the rest of the day, and that's not going to be good for anybody. So, being clear with what the boundaries are, with what the expectations are, and it could be not that those things are minor, but it could be something like that. It could also be if you're in a verbally abusive relationship, right? Your partner is just not talking to you the way that you should be talked to, the way that you expect to be talked to. If you call me these sorts of names one more time, this is what's going to happen. I'm a human being. I do not deserve to be called these things. I've had enough. I'm setting a boundary. It's okay to even explicitly say that you are setting a boundary. And if this boundary is violated, we might need to take a break from our relationship. Or maybe you're in a dating relationship. And so it might be a little bit easier to create space between you and your partner as opposed to living together. But if this behavior doesn't stop, then we need to stop seeing each other for a while. But then it's so important to follow through on those consequences because, again, otherwise the boundary just doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, it's like raising children. If you tell them, don't do this, and they do it, and there's no immediate consequence, they know, hey, I can do it.
And the thing too with boundaries is if you defend your boundaries, your partner will very quickly recognize that, oh, this is important to you. And more often than not, if it's a good relationship, your partner will respect those boundaries, right? It might take a little bit of time for both of you to figure out exactly what the boundary is, because that can be tricky if you're not sure. Maybe you set a too rigid of a boundary and you need to take it back a little bit and find a little bit of a balance there. But if your partner truly cares about you, then they're going to want to do these things for you. They're going to respect the boundaries.
Okay, so I was thinking back to an old relationship, and he was very much into sports, wanted to spend the weekends watching sports. I don't know anything about sports. I hate sports. It seems hell to me to just sit there and waste my weekend watching that, or even just being around someone watching that. So I always said, my next relationship, if they like sports, no. Now, is that me being a terrible, rude person, or is that a boundary or a preference? What would you call that?
Yeah, I'd say that's more of a preference, and that's actually it's I wouldn't say it's a deal breaker. That's an instance where I would say you might want to reframe the situation. I'm guessing some of the underlying reasons behind this dislike for sports is I don't want to spend all day sitting on the couch watching TV, right? There's a million other things that I want to be doing. So part of it might feel like this person is wasting their time. They're, not taking advantage of the beautiful weather, or they're lazy because all they want to do is sit around and watch sports. Partners do not have to have everything in common. That gets boring. They should have their own interests. So it's not to say that you would never want to spend time with somebody who enjoys sports and could sit on the couch all day and watch sports, but that's where you just need to have that explicit conversation. Sure, Saturdays you can spend all day watching sports, doing whatever it is you do, and I'm going to go do my thing, but let's make sure that on Sunday we spend the day together doing something that we both enjoy. And it doesn't have to be that way every single weekend, but as long as you're pretty clear about what your expectations are for this is your time and you get to do what you want to do, and I get to do what I want to do. But we also need to make sure that we're enjoying things together. Now, if this person isn't going to budge and they're going to say, nope, because this game is on, and then this game, and then this game, and then the big fights tonight, and then tomorrow we've got football all day. And if they're not willing to make room for you, then yeah, that's who would want to be in that relationship. But that's
Yes.
also not necessarily sports. That could be anything. You need to make room for each other's individual hobbies, wants, but then definitely make sure you have time for each other and find things that you enjoy doing together.
Yes. Thankfully, my husband hates sports just like I do. So we're good.
My husband loves sports and he will sit on the couch all day and watch sports. But I say, okay, that's fine. I'm going to go do this and do that and do this. And it works out just peachy for us.
Yes. As long as everybody gets their own me time and together time, I think it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Let's say someone in a relationship again breaks one of your boundaries, does something that you're like, no, I do not accept this behavior. I believe it's important to deal with it right then and there. But then there's other people who are like, I don't want to make a scene. I don't want to, whatever. I want to wait until we're alone and in a good place to talk about it. But I'm just like, no, I feel like that's terrible. Because I think, again, back to conditioning,
Hmm.
like for a child, like if they do something bad and you wait a couple hours, they're going to keep doing it because they got away with it technically.
Right.
What do you think?
Right. I'm on your side here, and research is on your side as well. But a few things to take into consideration, right? If you're out in public, lots of people around, you probably don't want to make a big scene. A boundary is violated, or something happens that makes you uncomfortable. No, 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 this is a no no. Do bring it up right then and there, because the person does need to in the moment, and because they're going to be more likely to remember what was happening and what they did and how they were feeling and all those sorts of things if you bring it up right when it happens. What just happened was absolutely not acceptable. I recognize that this is not the time or place to talk about this, but this is something that we will be talking about when we get home later. So if you truly are in a place where you shouldn't be talking about it, you don't want to, but you let that person know this was not okay and we will be discussing this later. But then again, you have to follow through on that, right? You do actually have to bring that back up later. If something happens and you are in the privacy of your own home and it is an acceptable time and place to bring it up, absolutely bring it up for a couple of reasons. Like I said, it's fresh for both of you. And sometimes it might have just been a misunderstanding. And so right then and there, you can clear the air. Once time has passed, Even if it was a misunderstanding at the time, it might be harder to recognize that because it's not fresh. You're not in that moment and feeling what you were feeling. Maybe you had a headache at the time, but later you don't really remember that you had a headache. And for some people, headaches can be, debilitating. And so they say and do things that they really didn't mean to say. They just weren't thinking straight because so much of their energy was focused on, oh my gosh, this headache. So, in the moment certainly is the preferable time to address those things. The other thing that can happen if we don't address it right away is you start to stew, right? And so that's in between when that initial behavior happened and when you're able to talk about it, your partner does something else that on any other day wouldn't have, registered, but because you're already stewing, now this little thing becomes part of what's bothering you. And then this other little thing becomes part of what's bothering you. So that when you do finally sit down to talk about it, it's not just about that initial incident anymore. It's now all of these things, and that is not a good way to address any situation. Really, we should be addressing issues one by one. We're more likely to resolve those issues if we do it that way as opposed to saving things up for a big blowout.
Yes, I've seen a lot of people do that example. It's terrible because I'm the type of person who, like I said, if something happens, I address it immediately. I do not bottle anything up. I don't understand people who pretend like nothing is wrong,
Mhm.
sometimes for months or years.
Yeah. Then there's the way we approach conflict, and conflict, by the way, does not have to mean a big in your face argument. But anytime that there's disagreeable communication between you and your partner can be classified as conflict. And so there's four conflict management styles, and one of them is the avoidance style. And if you're not an avoider, it's really hard to understand how these people can live their day to day lives. But the key thing to remember about the avoiders is that the relationship is so important to them that they would rather let some of these things go because they fear that if they bring it up, that's going to be more damaging to the relationship than if they just let them go. Avoiders also have a different tolerance for what bugs them than some of the other conflict management styles. I like to compare it to if you have a sibling that just sits there and taps you to bug you, right? An avoider is the sort of person that will let that sibling do it all day long, right? Yeah, I feel it, and yeah, it's annoying, but I would rather just let you keep doing this because to me it's not worth it to make it a big thing. Now, when the avoider gets to the point where, okay, I do feel like this is not good for our relationship, they will bring it up. And then we avoiders do need to be careful about bringing up everything versus the thing that kind of triggered them to take action. But it's not necessarily a bad way to approach situations as long as when they do actually come to confront their partner, they're using supportive communication as opposed to defensive communication and are really focused on the problem at hand. So yes, I see where you're coming from, but for a lot of people, yeah, it's better for their relationship, better for them to not bring up the issue when it happens.
When should you start setting boundaries? You don't want to do it, for example, when you first meet somebody or on a first date for a romantic relationship. I think that's a little bit much. But like
Yes.
when is the correct moment to set it and how do you go about it?
Yeah, so there's not necessarily a correct moment, and this sounds a little bit backwards because ideally you want to set a boundary before you would need it, but sometimes you don't know that you need a boundary until it's been violated. So, if you are in a long-standing relationship, as soon as you do start to feel something's not quite right. And so it might be that you just feel like your partner is asking too much of you, that you are feeling undervalued by your partner, that something your partner does or says is making you feel anxious. So, really being in tune with changes in how you're feeling about your partnership. And then, okay, what was it that my partner did or said that made me feel this way? And then also thinking about, okay, past experiences. Has this happened before, either in this relationship or in other relationships? And if this is just a one-time thing, probably not something you need to set a boundary for. But if you feel like this has been happening a bit more lately or happening in other relationships too, yeah, now might be the time to set a boundary. In new relationships, yes, certainly not on the first date or the first few dates, but also I would say too, if you know what you're looking for in a relationship, it is okay to come out and state those boundaries, whether it's in terms of your expectations for intimacy with this person, your expectations for how much time you're going to be spending with this person. If you are upfront with them, then it's going to make things down the road in tune with your feelings. But also, are there repeated behaviors that they don't necessarily make you feel negative, but you don't like them? They're not good for your partner, they're not good for the relationship. They're not necessarily bad things, but you could see how maybe they could turn into bad things. So maybe it's, I don't know, when you do have an argument, your partner seems to be attacking you more than they used to. And what I mean by that is the argument isn't so much about the behaviors anymore. Now it's resorted a little bit to name calling or making these grand statements. You always do this, you never do that. So when the interactions that you're having fall into those categories a little bit more frequently, that might also be a time for a boundary. But listen, when we are having an important conversation, an argument, whatever it is you want to call it, and I hear you make these statements that are really putting me on the defensive, that's not going to slide anymore. I need you to be more specific in what it is you have a problem with. Right? I need you to give me the details. I need you to pinpoint a particular moment in time when I did something that upset you so that I know how I can fix that behavior. If you continue to just say, oh, you're so lazy, oh, you're so disorganized, we're never going to fix these problems, right? We're not going to be happy.
I was just thinking, my little cousin, when she was maybe about 18, 19, she was very young. She got her first boyfriend. And sometimes he would be in a bad mood. Maybe something bad happened at work or whatever. And then he would be more angry, have like a bad tone that she didn't like. And I just remember her telling him on the phone, when you're ready to act like my boyfriend, call me. And she just hung up.
That's
And I was
great.
like,
Yeah, and for somebody so young, that's really impressive. That's great. And I think sometimes we're afraid to say things like that too. But yeah, if and to be fair, it's especially these days to have both people in the right frame of mind to talk about something. It's hard. So the best we can do is to minimize the distractions as much as we can. But yeah, do not be afraid to call out your partner and say, listen, this is not we're not solving anything right now and we need to take a break. And even couples that argue a lot or arguments are always lengthy, right? It's not like quick boom, we're done, we figured it out. Taking breaks is so important because it helps you calm yourself down, right? It helps you reflect on what's already been said, and a lot of times these breaks helps us put things into perspective. I couldn't admit it in the moment, but now that I have time to think about it, my partners, I have been doing this and it's not good for our relationship. So it's a lot easier to after you've taken that break to come back together because you've both had a chance to, cool things down. And you were right. I did do this. What do we need to do moving forward to make sure that this sort of thing doesn't happen again? And so you're more likely to work as a team to find a resolution as well. So, yeah, you don't have to solve things in that moment. You don't have to, if you don't like the way your partner is behaving in that moment, say so. I need a break. You can do it in a way that's not going to escalate things. I need a break. I need some time to think about this. So let's take a break. But again, you do have to make sure you actually come back and finish that conversation.
yes, I do know that whenever I'm having a disagreement with my husband, the minute he realizes he was wrong, he starts to get more upset. And then he just walks away and he needs his little timeout to calm down. And then he'll be like, all right, maybe a little of what you said was correct.
We're human, right? We don't like to be wrong. We don't like to feel inadequate. So to, be able to recognize that we probably did something we shouldn't have done is hard. But if we're able to come to that realization when we are feeling a little bit calmer, then that will bode well for the rest of that conversation.
And do you know anything about maybe teaching children how to set boundaries?
Yeah, actually. So, what's really important with children is to teach them the importance of using firm language, a firm voice, right? The power of no, but it can't be no, it has to be no. And role playing is huge with children, right? So if, it could be anything. It could be bullies at school. It could be, unfortunately, untrustworthy adults asking children to do things that children shouldn't be doing. And children are good about trusting their instincts. So having a conversation with a child, anytime something doesn't feel right to you, use your voice. Just, I feel like I'm back in fourth, fifth, sixth grade, whenever it was, when the DARE program came out and I was being taught to just say no. But there's some truth to that. When you say no and when you say it with that very firm voice, then and repeatedly, so that's goes for more than just children. It's called the broken record technique. If you stand your ground and just repeatedly say no or repeat whatever, behavior it is you do not want to have happen, eventually the other person will back down. You don't, and especially as a child, you don't have to give a reason for why you're saying no. As long as you just repeatedly say no, you can give a reason. Sometimes that's harder for children to do, but role playing with them, having a scenario where their job really is to only say no, say it firmly, oftentimes that's enough for a child.
Yes, and I like what you said about practicing saying no and say it firmly because if it's not quite the impact you really want, you need to just be like super straight face and just say it. And the other thing is, especially women, they have such a hard time saying no without
Mm,
coming up with a
a
reason.
million reasons,
And
yes.
I'm just like, you don't need a reason. But like the reason, and then the person they're saying no because I have to do this. Oh, I'll help you with that. And then they're like, crap, I need another
Right,
reason. And then you go
right,
into this cycle of finding reasons. And then I'm the girl who just says no. And they're like, why? And I'm like, because no. And then they get
yes.
mad. And I'm like, well,
Yes. So here's a trick that you can use when you incorporate how you feel about something. That's helpful because it's a lot harder to argue with somebody's feelings. We can't control the way we feel. We can control how we respond to our feelings, but we can't control the way that we feel. So even just using the phrase I feel can make it harder for somebody to negate what you've just said. No, why not? Because I feel like I need to just take a break right now. Because I'm feeling overwhelmed. Because or I feel like I would rather spend my time doing something else. It's you're framing it in a way that makes it harder for somebody to, like you said, offer a solution to that. So it makes it harder to say no. And I think too, if you are feeling like you're being rude by just saying no, the broken record method actually will work there too. You want to add a little bit of a self disclosure, right? No, because I have other things I want to do this Saturday. And you don't need to go into any more detail than that. But if you just keep repeating that, no, I have other things I want to do this Saturday. No, I have other plans this Saturday. Then again, eventually that person will stop trying to get you to say yes. And hopefully with no hard feelings. You have to keep an even keel. It's can be tricky there to keep your cool and not become defensive because why is this person not respecting my answer? But if you can keep it cool, that broken record method eventually, oh, okay, I guess they really don't want to do this, so I'll just leave them alone. And really no hard feelings.
I like that. I never even thought to say because I don't feel like it. I don't know. It just sounds rude to me, but I guess it does make sense. You can't argue with that.
And you know what? I think because we're not used to speaking honestly, that could be a shock for some people to hear when you express it as a feeling. But if we all kind of start to do that a little bit more frequently, then I feel like that pressure of having to explain why you don't want to do something could start to go away. Because even people who are the busybodies, who want to do everything, sometimes don't want to do something and for no good reason. So we can appreciate that. But yeah, we don't ever say that really.
So, talk to me about perception. What does it look like in an interpersonal relationship?
This is one of my favorite things. I think just the understanding the basic process of perception can help people so much. The perception process is three stages: selection, organization, interpretation. Basically, what that means is in the selection stage, we are bombarded with so many stimuli. And so, which of those stimuli are the ones that we're actually going to pay attention to? So, in our relationships, we like to think that because this person is important to me, of course I'm going to pay attention to what they're saying and how they're saying it. But in reality, it's hard for us to do that all of the time because of all of these other things that are going on around us, including in our own heads. The organization step of that process is trying to make sense of the stimuli that we did pay attention to. So, a lot of times we do that based on our past experiences, our past relationships, and use that to help us understand what's going on in this moment, in this relationship. But if we paid attention to some of the stimuli that aren't necessarily helpful in helping us organize the information, then we're going to have a harder time really figuring out what this person meant, what their intentions were. So then we get to the interpretation part of this process, and now it's okay, what does all of this mean? And we all know that your interpretation of what somebody says is often very different from the interpretation that they meant to convey. And there's a whole lot of reasons why that happens. But in our personal relationships, we have a tendency to take shortcuts. We make assumptions about what the other person means. We maybe don't fully listen or take in all of that information during that organizing stage of the process because, oh, I know this person, I know how they think, I know what they feel. And so that can lead to some big problems because we're making these assumptions about what the person means. Even things, just somebody's uh, particular mood at that moment is going to be a variable in that perception process. The time of day can be a variable in that process, the environment that you're in. And so, even a conversation that you had yesterday afternoon in your home when everybody was in a good mood would look really different in the morning when everybody's still sleepy and you're not fully awake. So, same conversation could have very different results based on all sorts of these variables. I think when it comes to interpreting what our partners are saying, we use shortcuts, and those shortcuts aren't always don't always give us a clear picture of what's going on as well. And so one of the one of the best things that we can do is what's called perception checking. So even in conversations that the the outcome of the conversation isn't all that important, right? It's more the mundane small talk that you do or just catching up with each other, right? Those are the types of conversations where we might not be paying super close attention, where we might miss something. But even in those moments, it's really important to check in with your partner and wait, when you said this, is that what you meant? Because in those little moments, you can practice that perception checking so that when the bigger, more impactful conversations come along, you feel comfortable doing those sorts of things with your partner. Because in those conversations, it's really important that what your partner intended to say. It's really important that you get to some sort of shared meaning more so than how was your day? Right? So when we can practice during the little conversations, then when the big conversations come up, we're better prepared to make sure that we do really understand where our partner is coming from, see their perspective, see their side of things. And again, that's just going to bode well for the relationship in that moment and then in the future as well.
Okay, so would an example be like somebody says something and you go, "Did you mean, were you thinking this and this when you said that?" And then they go yes or no, and then you get a feel for where they're at.
Yes. So I know it sounds easy. All you have to do is ask. And it almost sounds too easy, but we don't do that. Think of all the conversations that you have throughout your day. How many times did you ask for clarification? chances are you asked for clarification when it was necessary for you to get something done, but not necessarily beneficial to your partner. So we don't often ask for questions. We don't ask for clarification. We don't check in with that person to make sure that we understood what they said. We don't do that because it's time consuming. We don't do that because it can get frustrating if you struggle to figure out if it's a struggle to get on the same page. It's frustrating. And again, if it's somebody that we've known for a long time, we make these assumptions that I don't need to ask for clarification because I just know. And that is what gets us into trouble. If you're not comfortable asking questions or asking for clarification, another way to perception check is to just step back for a moment and recognize, okay, there's a million stimuli that both of us are being exposed to, and these are the things that I paid attention to. I don't know what my partner paid attention to. And it gets tricky here too because of our nonverbal communication. Half the time, we don't even realize what our nonverbals are conveying to somebody else. And so they might have picked up on our nonverbals, which in that moment in time were not actually representative of what we were actually feeling. And so now we've got all kinds of ways that a misunderstanding can happen. If one of the examples I like to use is people who just have naturally just have an expressionless face or always look sad or always look upset. Those poor people get misunderstood all the time because people look at their face and say, oh, this, and they're focusing more of the attention on their face and trying to understand what their facial expressions mean rather than what the person is saying. And they're actually missing the message because they're focusing on the wrong part of the message. But if you can take a step back and say, okay, what are the other stimuli that are in this environment that could lead to why we're not on the same page? What are they focusing on? What am I focusing on? And how might that be distorting the message? Or how might that be me not fully understanding what this person is trying to convey to me? We can also think about, okay, this is how I interpreted it. Again, it's hard to admit we might be wrong, but there's a million other interpretations that I could have made. What are some of those other interpretations? So don't just land on that first interpretation. Give it some thought. What are some other ways I could have interpreted this information? This is not something that you can necessarily do in the moment, but is really helpful to do after the fact is check in with other people. My neighbor and I go on daily walks together, and a lot of our conversations are, okay, so I was talking to, and they said this, and then I said that, and I don't know, do you think I should have said that? Because getting another person's perspective, especially somebody who wasn't there bombarded with all the extra stimuli, can give you a better sense of, oh, yeah, actually, you were out of line. Or, no, that seems like you probably handled that okay. So, getting that sort of third person perspective can be helpful, or even going to a mutual friend. Gosh, so and I got into a bit of an argument the other day, and this is what happened. And that mutual friend, because they know both of you, can, okay, you know how get, maybe you should reevaluate what they said. I don't really think they probably meant to hurt you that way. Having somebody else there to bounce the situation off can help us put it into perspective as well. I think we also need to remember that perspective changes over time. Think about how maybe a former partner, a former romantic relationship, right? Your perceptions of them when you first met them were probably very positive and you had good feelings associated with them. But then if it was a not so great breakup, your perceptions change. That person no longer gives you warm, fuzzy feelings anymore. So perceptions are not set in stone. They change, they can change drastically. So, what once we thought might not necessarily be the case then.
So I thought of several examples. I'm the person that everybody thought hated them because of my face. Because I was just so painfully shy, especially when I was younger, that when someone went to talk to me, I was in shock and I didn't know what to do. And they're like, oh my gosh, she must hate me.
I don't want to talk to this person.
Yeah. And then the other day I was talking to my husband and we were planning a vacation and then he looked like he was stressed out. I'm like, "Are you stressed out because you're thinking about like how much it's going to cost? Are you stressed out because you're worried about the economy or not working that week or what is it?" And he's like, "No, I'm just really tired." And I'm like, "Oh, I totally read that wrong."
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Variations of this meme all over the place, but you never know what is going on in somebody else's world. And it could be somebody who generally has a very positive disposition and you always have a good interaction with them. And they might be the type of person that they don't share things, they keep things to themselves. So when something really is bothering them, it stands out to you because it's not normal for them. And but that can really get your brain in overdrive. Oh my God, this person's always really so friendly and so welcoming and so warm, and something's a little bit off. And I don't know what to do with that information because that's not consistent with what I know about this person. And so instead of just accepting that, okay, something's going on with this person, and so our interaction might be a little bit different than normal, we freak out about it. And that's when we start to make these really crazy interpretations. And that's when it's very important to make sure we're perception checking. We don't want to, like I said, we jump to conclusions all the time, and we don't want to, we want to make sure that we're not jumping to false conclusions.
So, how can you tell the difference between passive, assertive, and aggressive?
Yeah. So passive is can come through in a few ways. Passive could just mean you're not doing anything to express your needs, your wants, your desires, or you're being very indirect about it. Instead of coming right out and saying, let's go see a movie this weekend. Gosh, we haven't seen a movie in a while. Because your partner could just say, yeah, you're right, we haven't. And the conversation ends there, right? When you're passive, you're not behaving in a way that's going to get you your desired results. When you're aggressive, you behave in a way that likely will get you your desired results, but in doing so, you potentially damage the relationship because you're not taking your partner's needs, wants, desires, feelings into consideration. Assertive is the happy middle ground here. You get what you want. You don't always get what you want, but you're more likely to get what you want, and you're doing it in a way that also takes into account your partner's feelings, their wants, and you really do approach it more as problem solving with your partner as opposed to this is what I want and I don't care if your needs are being met. So when people practice assertive communication, and it can be really hard for some people because they're not used to asking for what they want. And it could go deeper than that too. They don't believe that they deserve what they want. And so if they don't even believe that, then it's going to be really hard to ask for what they want. When you do it assertively, you're not just making demands, right? You're very clearly stating what it is you want or don't want, but you're also open to hearing your partner's perspective on things. And you are willing to work with your partner to get your needs met. And a lot of times, what happens with assertive communication too is we learn things about our partner's needs that we didn't know. Because once you start communicating assertively, that means that you're communicating in a supportive rather than a defensive way. And so your partner is also more likely to start to share their needs as well. And so even if you don't end up getting what you want, you also haven't put the relationship in a dangerous position because you've expressed your needs respectfully with concern for your partner. And yeah, you might be disappointed. You didn't quite get what you wanted, but you didn't do so at the cost of hurting the relationship either.
I like that. I used to be passive. And now when I'm around people that are passive, I'm just like, just tell me what you want. And it's so hard when you're very passive. It's really hard. I don't know what needs to switch on you to make you more assertive, but it's definitely an issue for some people.
It is. And it's when you do practice assertive behavior, it actually does increase your self esteem and it increases your relationship satisfaction. And so it is really frustrating to see people struggle to be assertive because part of the reason they're not is they don't have the self-esteem to do it, but if they could just do it, that would help build their self-esteem. Yeah, it's tricky. It's one of those things too where you could know the tools, right? You could know how to do it, but if you still feel like you don't deserve to get what you want in a relationship, it's not gonna happen. You can lead a horse to water, right?
Do you think that you can, in a way, fake it till you make it for that?
Ah, that's a good question. I think if you think you can fake it till you make it, then yes. And there is actually some research that supports that. If I just full of self-doubt and don't think very much of myself, it doesn't matter how much I fake it. I don't think I'm gonna make it. But if I've got a pretty good sense of who I am and I'm pretty confident in my abilities to do things, but maybe I'm trying something new, and so of course I'm gonna have some hesitation and some self-doubt because it's new, yeah, then I might benefit from faking it till I make it. So it's a little bit more complicated than just faking it till you make it. But what I do think is that when you speak confidently and speak with assertions as opposed to questions, then people will react to you differently. And so when you start to see those more positive reactions, that can start to build your confidence a little bit. And I think those are actually pretty easy steps that somebody can. So, and women do this a lot. They ask tag questions. So they'll make a statement, but then they, don't you think, at the end of it. And so it's not really a statement anymore. You're opening yourself up for people to disagree with you, right? If you can stop yourself before you ask that question at the end, then people will look at you differently than if you show that hesitation. And then even just speaking in a more confident voice. And that's something that you practice by yourself in front of me, or you record yourself on your phone and play it back and see how it sounds. And okay, what can I do differently to make myself sound even more confident? I teach public speaking. And so that's one of the biggest things is you know what you want to say, the audience doesn't know. So even if you mess up, if you act like you didn't mess up, the audience isn't going to know. But the minute you draw attention to that mistake, not only does the audience know, but they're going to remember it because you drew attention to it. So by speaking with confidence, even if what you wanted to say didn't quite come out the way you had hoped, then people respond very differently to you. And that can be a small stepping stone into building your sense of self, building your self-esteem a little bit.
When I met my husband, I thought he was incredibly intelligent because he would say everything with confidence. And I was like, wow, he's so smart. I'm not smart enough to be with him. And I had a little low self esteem about that. And then I realized when he would repeat stuff that I had told him, he repeats stuff with such confidence. And I'm like, that was a joke I made. That wasn't even like a fact.
Yeah.
And then yeah, and then you realize it's how you say everything.
Yep, my dad was the same way. He would blurt out probably the most ridiculous thing, but he would say it with such confidence and, "Oh, wow, that's really neat." And, then of course he'd come back later and tell us he was joking, but you never knew. You still don't know with my dad because he's able to do that.
Yeah, I find that fascinating, but I did realize that it's all in how you say things, and if you're confident about something, people will trust your opinions more. And I also noticed that when I go to a doctor and I ask for like advice for something, should I take this or whatever? And if they're a little wishy washy with anything, then forget it. I can't go to them anymore. It could be that they're totally right or totally wrong, but just how they say things is whether or not I will listen to someone.
Yeah, and that's one of those to go back to perception, right? That's one of these things where sometimes we don't even realize that's what we're paying attention to, that's what we're noticing. But gosh, why am I so fascinated by this person but not this person? It's just in the way that they say it. But unless we really step back and think about it, that's not something that in the moment we're focusing on.
So, what is the line between assertive and being unreasonable and hard to live with?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one too. I think it comes back to approaching your needs as problem solving rather than just getting what you want. So I'm trying to think of an example here. Maybe you're not spending enough time with your partner, and so you could be nasty about it. You could be more on the aggressive side of things, and we need to spend more time together. And rah, 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 rah. I should also say too, aggressive doesn't mean using a harsh tone of voice, right? You could this would verge on the end of manipulation, but you could be very sweet in how you say something, but still be aggressive. But when we're assertive, it's we haven't been spending a lot of time together. And I'm realizing that's something that's really important to me. And for me to continue to feel satisfied in this relationship, I'm going to need to spend more time with you. What are some things that we can do to make sure that we're spending time with each other? I think sometimes we go into an interaction already with a solution in mind. And so we don't give our partner a chance to be part of that conversation. You can go into a conversation with an ideal outcome, right? But you need to be open that might not be the outcome that you settle on. So if you go into that conversation and allow your partner to have some input, you very well might come to the outcome that you were hoping for, but because your partner gave input, feels to both of you like it was a joint effort. If your partner feels like you're forcing a solution onto them, even if it is a good solution, it might not be as long lasting because your partner didn't feel like they played a role in it. Or again, even if your partner deep down inside realizes that this is a good solution, there might be some resentment because they didn't play a part in coming up with that solution. So I think the minute you start to not allow your partner to be part of it is when you're crossing that line, is when you're asking for too much or starting to be unreasonable in your requests. Because if you truly are being unreasonable, and if the relationship is in general a good relationship, your partner's going to call you out on that, hopefully in a non defensive way. And by the way, there's strategies for handling criticism, right? No relationship is perfect. At some point, your partner is going to say something where you feel attacked, where you feel threatened. And the worst thing you can do is lose your cool in that moment. So when you are expressing a need, when you are trying to get what you want in that relationship, you need to be open to hear what your partner has to say about. Be open to there might be other solutions than the one that you had in mind going into this conversation. But if you can work together to come up with something, then the immediate results are going to be satisfying, but also then the long-term results will likely be satisfying as well.
So, are there any ways that people can work with you or learn more about you and your work?
Absolutely. I can be reached on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and then I also have my book here. Conversationally Speaking is actually a book that has been around for quite some time. And the long story short here is Alan Garner, my co author on the book, several years ago, realized that he needed to update the book because it was still popular, but people were complaining about the outdated examples and the language was a little bit outdated as well. But we got together and it was my responsibility to update the book and make sure that the research was still sound or uh, make any additions to the research to make sure the research was still up to date. But this book is wonderful for multiple reasons. And I think some people think conversationally speaking is only if you are a really shy person or you don't know how to start a conversation. And it is great for that. But the probably the rest of that's one third of the book. The other two thirds of the book is for anybody. And so a lot of the things that we talked about today, you can read about in conversationally speaking. What if my partner is criticizing me? What can I do about that to not turn it into this big thing? There's a chapter on handling criticism. How do I say no and have people respect it when I say no in any context, really? Conversationally speaking speaks to that as well. One of the other things that I feel sometimes happens is people learn about skills, whether it's reading a book online, whatever it is, but then they don't know what to do with those skills once they've learned them. And so the last chapter in Conversationally Speaking is about goal setting. How, now that I have these skills, how do I actually put them into action so that I can see the results of them? And so altogether, conversationally speaking, is going to work for people who just, yeah, I don't know what to do, and I'm having a hard time meeting people, making relationships, and I'm in a well-established relationship, but these are some things that are coming up, and I don't really know how to deal with them. I thought I was a good communicator, but maybe not so much. And then how do I put all these pieces together so that I can make changes in my relationship? So yes, conversationally speaking, it is available on Amazon.
Yeah, and when I was researching you, I was looking at the book and some reviews, and a lot of people found it good for maybe their shy child or the child that is maybe like in college and needs to learn how to date, but still maybe too scared to talk to girls. And just a lot of different situations still found that the book was helpful. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think it's a great book. I might get it for my kid.
I would highly recommend it.
So, is there anything else you would like to share with the audience before we go?
I think communication is a skill that is overlooked. And I see this with my students all the time. They come into class thinking, why do I need to learn about this in class? I do this every day. I've been doing it every day my whole life. And that is true. But when you really start to think about why we communicate the way that we do, and when you take a dual perspective, so thinking about why your partner is doing the things that they're doing, you start to realize that, gosh, I'm really not as good as I thought I was. Or, okay, I've handled this in an okay way, but there are ways that I can handle it in a much better way. So, for anybody at any stage in a relationship to really understand these communication skills, to take them to heart, is only going to make your relationships better. And it really does hurt my heart a little bit when people think, I don't need to learn about this, because everybody that does, it's an eye-opening experience. Oh gosh, this is why I've been doing this all along. Oh my gosh, now I know why my partner reacts when I do this that way. So I would encourage anybody to take some time and think about how they can improve their communication skills, even if you think you're already pretty fantastic at it.
Yes, and there's always room for improvement. So, again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you. I had a really good time.